If you're a fan of K-pop, and especially 4th gen K-pop, chances are you've heard about Enhypen. They are a group that debuted in 2020 for a survival show called Island, with the final lineup consisting of Jungwon, Heesung, Jae, Jake, Sunghoon, Suno, and Nikki. After their debut, the group started to gain fame due to their extensive global fanbase, compared to other groups who have the Korean netizens as their bigger fanbase, concept, and to some degree, Dark Moon. Dark Moon is a comic series available on Webtoon which does its best, huge accent on what I just said, to explain the lore of Enhypen and TEAM. TEAM is a Japanese group that debuted in 2020 through the survival show and audition The First Howling, with some of the members from the final lineup being eliminated contestants from Island. Throughout the series, the fans are able to understand the backstory of each of the group's comebacks, and not gonna lie, this is actually pretty niche. You don't really get to see this type of treatment from other K-pop groups. Sure, BTS, TXT, and LE SSERAFIM also have their own webtoon comics, but Dark Moon is by all means more superior, as it is the only series out of all of Hype's comics to have extended itself to 6 sources of media, a special album comeback, and have the comic be directly linked to Enhypen. BTS, TXT, and LE SSERAFIM do not require you to read their webtoons to understand their comebacks. But this does come into issue of fans not understanding what the lore of Enhypen is, asking for guidance from fans who do have a certain level of knowledge when it comes to the lore. Most fans don't really spend hours trying to dissect the lore of a comic made for a K-pop group, but if there's anything that FNAF taught me is that convoluted lore is my cup of tea, and I am here to drink. Oh, I love it! Dark Moon has 6 media sources, with 4 already released. The first one is Blood Altar, which features both Enhypen and TEAM, called as the main story. The next one is Grey City, which is TEAM's backstory on how the group got formed in universe, followed by Children of Vanfield, the equivalent of Grey City to Enhypen's characters, and lastly Blood of Vargar, which is a prologue to Children of Vanfield, making it the first entry in the series in chronological order. Exclusive to Naver, Webtoon's Korean version. The other 2 are announced projects that got teased, but so far no other info about the release date was announced. We have The Witch of Yerasa, which is the midpoint between Grey City and Blood Altar for TEAM, and lastly, The Two Moons. This one is the latest entry in the series, being the direct sequel to Blood Altar and its events. This video is part 1 of a 2-parter where I will discuss the issues of this series as well as talking about the lore and what is going on in the story. If you're a fan of either Enhypen or TEAM and want to get a clear image of what is going on in the lore without, watching 15 ads on Webtoon and see 15 episodes a day, then the second part will be more in tune with what you're looking for. I will also make a video separate from the Dark Moon series where I will talk about Island, so stay tuned for that video as well. Consider this the video where I just roast the crap out of one of my most beloved Webtoon series ever, and the next video is the one where I will spend 19 minutes of my life telling y'all the base of the lore so you can go and watch the next comeback and be like, oh, so that is how things unfold. Enhypen's characters consist of vampires with magical powers, who I will refer to by their Dark Moon names, but for easier understanding of the plot, in the follow-up video, I will refer to them by their members' name. We have Heesung as Heli, Jae as John, Jake as Gino, Sunghoon as Solon, Suno as Sean, Jungwon as Jaka, and Nikki as Noah. Their story mainly revolves around a main character who seems deeply underwhelming. While the main characters of Dark Moon are Enhypen and TEAM's fictional identities, the overarching main protagonist is a girl named Sooha. She is introduced in Blood Altar as a new transfer student at the Chalice Academy, Enhypen's school that happens to rival Sunshine City School and TEAM's school. During the events of Blood Altar, Sooha tries to deal with the trauma from her past that leads her to uncover the true origins of her identity and how she would have to deal with the information she just received to keep the people around her close and safe. If that sounds like a nice way to write a protagonist, you gotta thank me because I did my hardest trying to write this character as nice as possible. It's hard to do that when the personality of Sooha is that of chalk. The only thing that makes Sooha even remotely interesting is her backstory. Her true origins reveal she was the princess of an ancient kingdom, the kingdom of Ashana, who possessed great shamanic magic. She is the new ruler of both vampires and werewolves, who all lived together in Ashana, as the kingdom was ruled by essentially the queen of vampires and guarded by the spirit of wolf god Vargar. I have no idea, by the way, who this wolf god is, by the way. I read the Northern mythology, and I never once in my life heard about it. I heard about Fenrir, but never about Vargr, so I'm assuming this is their fictional take on Fenrir without directly noticing. I don't know. However, the princess got killed during a staged coup led by the chancellor of the kingdom, who wanted to gain power and wanted the princess's powers for himself. When she died, she sent the knight who aided her, revealed to be the Enhypen members themselves, into the distant future in an attempt to protect the kingdom. The soul leads up to the princess having reincarnated into Sooha, a girl from a small village where she got ostracized due to her being called out as a vampire. During this time, she meets Chris, a boy who, despite the village's rumors, still decides to befriend her and trust her. However, Chris gets murdered by an actual vampire, and Sooha starts to grow a deep hatred for vampires, vowing she will kill all of them. You would think that as a result of this traumatic experience, she will have a hard time trusting people, and that she will be a character whose development comes from moving past the trauma and manage to find happiness in life. With the way she's first introduced in the story, I thought she would fit this role just fine, being the equivalent of Persona 3's Makoto Yuki, but the second she enters her room, her character turns 180, and she all of a sudden acts severely optimistic. One would think this is her coping mechanism, but in reality this is just her personality. She literally becomes, from the second episode onwards, the equivalent of a Mary Sue, with none of the backstory even remotely affecting her character. She befriends Enhypen and andteam, and outside of this optimism, her only other traits are awkwardness when the characters outright flirt with her, or when she seems to be acting dumb when important events are unfolded to her, but because those events are not outright explained to her, she seems to go into detective mode. Basically, don't tell Sooha you ate the fruit you carried in your bag, which you did see earlier, but tell her you ate the apple you had, cause she will go into Sherlock Holmes mode trying to guess if you ate a banana or a grapefruit. Her backstory only comes forward when she talks about Chris, which is only used in a very lazy way to show to us that she's meant to have trauma, but Chris is the only thing she talks about, as if she's hyperfixated on him. She does not talk about being treated very badly by the village, the lack of friends she had. No sir, none of that. Just the equivalent of Bloom from Mystery of the Abyss onwards being obsessed with Sky.
Something's wrong. I don't see Sky. Let's move in closer.
Bloom is so Sky obsessed, it's exhausting.
Even her hate for vampires quickly dissipates. The idea of her hating vampires only to meet Enhypen and befriend them, just to find out later that they are in fact vampires too, would make for an interesting conflict. She does manage to see that Enhypen, unlike other vampires, are trustworthy as they rush to her rescue when she was attacked by rogue vampires, but she just seems to forgive and forget too quickly. Like, yes, forgive the boys from keeping their status as vampires a secret from you, but at least in the beginning, act a bit cautious around them. Wouldn't you still have hate or trauma from your overall history with vampires? Make Sooha have an internal conflict where she wants to get closer to Enhypen, but she does not want to at the same time because of the fact that they are vampires. And have her accept that not all vampires are the same and that she can trust them while also being able to let go of the memory of Chris. Sooha, if it wasn't obvious by now, is a very poor attempt of representing engines and Enhypen's fandom that consists of a conglomerate of people from which it is hard to get a certain trait from, other than fangirling, in which case Sooha is shown to display that trait over and over and over again. She's basically YN in a fanfiction available on Wattpad, which makes this even more ironic since Blood Altar started on Wattpad, then moved to Webtoon. Fucking kill me! And yes, turning an entire fandom into a character is indeed hard, but this makes Engine look very generic as a fandom. Have Sooha be like the Persona protagonist, who despite having a pretty bland personality at least at first, given they are the MCs of their games, as the story progresses they get to evolve into their own characters. With the overarching protagonist being written like this, it leads us to wonder, how is Enhypen written in Dark Moon? Enhypen is a boy group that is well known for their unity and ability to work together without any problems, while also serving as an example that groups can debut for a survival show while still remain united and work things out. It is obvious that all the members care about each other and want their fanbase to stand all of them equally, as they themselves stated that the bias of Enhypen should be in fact Enhypen. The Vampire Boys, as I like to call them, are an example of what happens when the writers do not have a single clue how to develop certain characters without outshining the obvious ones. The writers clearly wanted some of the characters to be treated as quote-unquote the main characters, while the rest are left as secondary characters. but that does not work with Enhypen's formula of what their unity means. I highly doubt they would like to see that some of the characters barely get any character development or in fact anything to have their characters based on. The Vampire Boys are most of the time written as a hive mind where they all go together and do everything together, which makes it harder for them to have dreams or ambitions outside of the group. Literally the Winx during the Nickelodeon era. With the way the story is written, it seems the concept of Dark Moon started with a minimum of 5 characters and later rolled out the remaining 12 as filler for the story to feel longer and more complete, making it by extension more incomplete, but you know, let them have it. You don't even need to read 10 chapters to grasp that the writers picked some of the more popular members to stand out as the main characters. According to the writers, the characters that manifest main character energy are Heli, Solon, and Sean, with the rest falling into secondary character territory. Heli as a character is pretty generic, and the only reason he's on this list is because of his role as the main romance option for Sooha. He is the leader of the vampires, which is very weird given how in reality Jungwon is the leader of Enhypen, with Pisung falling into the fake magnet category 99% of the time. And back when he had the chance to pursue his dreams, he became the manager of a bar. I'm doing my best to think about other things I can talk about regarding his character. Oh, wait, he loves to read books. Yeah, he loves to read books. What kind of books? Fuck you, we don't know. His powers to read minds, albeit cool, leave him as one of the weaker members during combat, which forces him to rely more on using his sword to do damage than his powers. That's all I can say about his character. I'm so sorry. Solon is by far the most fleshed out character out of all the vampires, and it shows in his personality and talents. I'm going to talk more about his powers a bit later, but the idea of having a tsundere character actually sounds very peculiar. It doesn't really scream Sunkun to me. I guess it might have to do with the original impression that most have regarding Sunkun, that he's the cold member of the group, but interesting nonetheless. He acts cold and distant to everyone, his fellow members included, but deep down cares a lot about them and is willing to protect them with his life. And his hobby includes ballet, which is a tie into Sunkun's love for ice skating, where you have to be graceful on ice to not look like a boulder about to smash into someone. By far, he gets the most justice out of the characters he receives, but that comes face to face with his issues. Sean is probably the second most fleshed out character. The main romance of Dark Moon is allegedly a love square where Sean does not have room to participate in. As such, he is the third wheel of the whole romance shenanigans, and rightfully so. His character at first is depicted and treated as a comic relief character who acts dumb and naive, but quickly changes personality if he has to. This man can be super positive in 1 second, and the next one look like the next big serial killer on TV. As a result, one would assume Sean is a psychopath or a yandere, but in reality is just a reference to Suna's duality, who can pull both the cute concept and dark concept if he wants to. His powers include the ability to stick to walls, which could tie into his clinginess? I don't know. And mind control. Yes, this man has the power to mind control and order people to do whatever he wants. He does this by holding his breath and exhaling, which leads to the molecules of his breath reaching his targets and becoming his mind slaves. This does come at the expense of Sean only being able to control people for a limited amount of time before getting tired, but there are no limits to his requests, only how long he can hold a person under said influence. This makes him an OP character, as his powers can range from extracting information from people to forcing said people to rip their hearts out and hand it to him. That's really dark actually, what the fuck? The only thing weird about his character is his hobby, which cannot even be called a hobby because it is a job. Sean used to be a hotel portier. Why? Why? Have him be an art critic if anything, because let me tell you, the side eyes he would show to some people's art will have said people give up on their careers and run away in tears. And rightfully so.
Bombastic side-eye. Criminal offensive side-eye.
Gino is the only character who one can say is a hybrid between a main character and a secondary character. He does not have any importance in Blood Altar whatsoever, with the first half of Blood Altar featuring the characters representing stereotypes. The leader, the tsundere, the strong one, the smart one, etc., which leaves Gino with breadcrumbs. In terms of Blood Altar, I literally cannot even get a proper personality out of him. That's how generic he is. In Children of Vanfield, however, he gets more material to work with through Barbara. Barbara is Gino's girlfriend from the past that gets brutally murdered by the town where the boys used to live, making Gino go and avenge Barbara's death by committing arson and killing the one responsible for this, and also murder a bunch of the rogue vampires while at it too. However, after this chapter of the boy's life is over, Gino seems to forget about Barbara altogether and not once mention her again. He's shown to love flying, hence his decision to become a pilot before Blood Altar, which, oh my god, okay, that's hot. That's generally super hot. And his powers allow him to create fire, which might type into Jake's hot-headed personality. Look, I'm a Scorpio myself, and I just know that Jake has an impulsive attitude that he keeps chained inside of himself. If he were to let that side of him out, he would burn everything into his path. This does actually show up in his character, as Gino is the first one to develop his powers by not listening to the authorities that tried to keep his and his brother's powers in control. The other characters are deeply underwhelming, so much so that there isn't much to talk about them outside of their powers and hobbies, if one can call them as such. John is a strong member of the group who has super strength, and yes, that's all you're gonna get, J-Stans, who used to be a taxi driver before Blood Altar. What? Why a taxi driver? What does that have to do with Jay's personality? Why not a musician who creates songs? I don't know, something, anything. Jaka is a smart member of the group who possesses super speed and is a doctor, cause Lord forbid have him get a proper hobby that he might actually enjoy. And Noah is the mysterious member who gets to control darkness and used to be a toy store owner. Now, Noah is a bit more acceptable than the other two, but the bar is so low, it isn't even a surprise anymore. It's just the bare fucking minimum. Him having a toy store is an odd choice, might tap into the fact Nicky gave up his teenage years for a chance to debut, and his powers play into a very small character arc of his that revolves around his desire to have powers like his brothers. To give more context, he developed those powers a bit later than the rest, and when they did start to show up, he became afraid of his powers and relied on his brothers for emotional support. This all ties up in one episode, by the way, and no longer gets mentioned afterwards. But that at least is something. Now, regarding these characters' hobbies, why not have them do stuff the members actually enjoy? Like have John be a guitarist who sings in restaurants and bars and gains attention as an artist, have Noah be a dancer who can kill it on the dance floor, and have Jaka be a taekwondo athlete. Literally anything that would make the fans look at these characters and go, oh, there's my bias. But sadly, this is how little it matters to the writers about having these characters stand out more from one another. This also grows into a massive issue when Sooha is added into the mix. Even though Dark Moon has a love square featuring the canon romances, the story in Blood Altar is presented as a polyamorous story where all 7 members fight for Sooha's feelings and try to win her heart. And with Sooha's inability to turn them down, even if she does look uncomfortable, this leads into the characters being overly obsessed with trying to get on her good side. Fortunately, since Jaka and Noah are on the side of the characters that do not get to do much, this makes the two of them unable to form even slightly a possible romantic relationship with Sooha outside of their friendship. I know y'all wanted this wannabe YN to interact with Jungwon and Nikki, but keep in mind when Dark Moon first released, that being early 2022, these two members were minors. And no, I'm not gonna go through how Jungwon could be considered 18 if you take into account his age in South Korea's system at the time. That logic only applies to South Korea alone, and everywhere else, he was still 17. Also, it would be super uncomfortable for these two minors to interact with Sooha, who is meant to represent a massive people of different ages, ranging from young girls to middle-aged ladies. As I mentioned, Solon is by far the most fleshed out vampire out of all the characters from his group, if not from all of Dark Moon itself. His personality, character development, and powers are so interesting and unique, it's like nothing can stop him, except the writers who did in fact kill all of it silently. Solon, unlike the other members, has the power to shapeshift into a werewolf. He got these powers originally from the princess who did it through a blood transfusion, and after she sent the boys into the future, he became a crossbreed between a vampire and a werewolf. This fundamentally makes him stand out from his brothers, but not in a good way. Solon's character arc is a longer version of Noah's small character arc, but as a result, has Solon look more realistic and more relatable. We all have our own demons that we are afraid to show to the world, and as such, it takes time to reveal our true selves to the people we care about. In Noah's case, he was also found by his members when he was hiding from them, so his arc can be quickly solved, but Solon did not get this treatment. Instead, he gets this entire character arc go on throughout the entirety of Children of Anfield, as well as a good chunk of Blood Altar. And what makes it better is that he does not make the arc his entire personality, like someone else. Sure, one can say his tsundere attitude is tied to his arc, but when you think about it, that's the entire charm of his character, to begin with. Solon's arc starts with his fear of showing his true powers to his brothers, which leads to him having nightmares where his powers are exposed and his brothers lock him in a cage and plan to kill him. Damn, that's really dark. He distances himself from them, and during full moons, he runs out into the woods to transform. This all leads up to the introduction of Sophie, a secondary character from Season 2 of Children of Anfield, who is a half-werewolf young girl who ran away from home and is adopted by Enhypen, who start to view her as a little sister. By the end of the season, Sophie sadly loses control over her powers and starts to act on instinct. Solon recognizes Sophie's pain and attempts to kill her so she can finally rest in peace, but the rest of the members are confused by Solon's actions and do their best to try and help Sophie. However, Sophie goes and attacks the brothers, almost harming one of them, forcing Solon to stab Sophie and let her bleed out. The rest of the members go through grieving Sophie's death, which shows to Solon that the brothers do not care about someone being different from them as long as there is love in the dynamic. Still, Solon keeps his identity a secret until Blood Altar, where the boys start to question what could Solon's powers be, leaving him worried about coming out. When the brothers get attacked by rogue vampires and are forced to use their powers, Solon uses his powers to save Noah from an attack, which leads to the boys finding out that Solon can transform into a werewolf. How do you think this long-lasting, relatable character arc comes to a conclusion? Well, Noah says Solon, and that's it. You don't get more than that, case closed. What? Why would Noah just say that? Why don't the rest of the members say anything? Why doesn't anyone say anything? Did the others know and keep it a secret until Solon decided to come out? What? Why would you build up to this moment only to abandon it just like that? The only thing I can think of is that the way Solon seems to avoid telling his brothers about his powers, as well as his powers making him different from his brothers, could be a very warped way of someone coming out, because the way Solon acts, with him even being scared of how his brothers will view him as a result of him coming out, all kind of falls into this idea, which, given how South Korea is pretty conservative and LGBT is viewed pretty badly there, it's in a progress, it's an evolution, but it's still pretty bad. It all could lead up to the writers abandoning this arc. But I dislike it, to be honest, because at the end of the day, this webtoon is based on real people who also portray these characters themselves, so creating this idea that Sooha could be LGBT is a very bad way to have a member come out, if it happens to be true, and also something really fucked up because we all know these idols are better off closeted from the real world than coming out. Although it's a relief to let your true self out, in K-pop, coming out comes at the expense of your idol career. So thanks, I hate it. I like Solon's character, but this arc is just so messed up on so many levels. We have talked enough about Enhypen's vampires, so let's go and talk a bit about andteam. andteam is a group that consists of 9 members, compared to Enhypen's 7-member lineup. From these 9 characters, one would think that at the very least these characters would get the vampire boys treatment and call it a day, right? Oh no, the andteam treatment is much worse. andteam's characters are werewolves, and from this lineup we have 3 categories: the main characters, the secondary characters, and the episodic characters. Yes fam, that's how bad the treatment is. You have members from andteam, a group where all members matter, being put into 3 categories. This info might not show up in the text, but from the way it screams in your face by the writers, you cannot tell otherwise. I will mention here that there are chances Darkman was in its early stages of development during the Island era, given the characters and how they are being created. In the main character category, also known as the Island characters, we have Khan, represented by Kay, Enzi, represented by EJ, Najak, represented by Nicholas, and Tail, represented by Taki. The 4 members these characters are based upon are the only members of andteam who participated in Island and got eliminated eventually from the show. Khan is the leader of the werewolves, once again, weird choice given how EJ is the actual leader of andteam.
Oh. I'm Gabe.
Give.
Gabe.
I gave.
EJ is the brains of the group, Najak is the brawn, and Tail is the youngest member of the group. Once again, weird choice given how in N-Team, Maki is the maknae, but it serves as further proof that Dark Moon was written in the Island era, where the producers laid their eyes on these four for their next group. The story of Grey City mainly revolves around these four and their friendship and how they managed to defeat the big bad of the story, with the others being planets that gravitate around them. Ironically, they are also the only characters who also received the same initial treatment that Enhypen's characters got subjected to, cause the rest of the members sure didn't. The secondary characters, who I'll refer to as the lore characters, are Mahan, represented by Fuma, Camille, represented by Cho, and Ruslan, represented by Harua. Camille is the hot-headed member of the group, Mahan is the peacemaker, and Ruslan is just there. I'm not even kidding about this. I'm doing my best. As I'm recording this, I'm looking and trying to find anything that I can talk about regarding Ruslan, but it irks me that there's nothing to talk about. These three are the lore characters because they are always participating in the story before the main conflict is actually about to start. The big bad of Grey City had the power to brainwash humans and werewolves, and managed to brainwash these three to make them into minions of the big bads and have them fight the rest of the werewolves. They do get saved at the end of the story, but by the time Blood Altar starts, these three once again get captured by the overarching main antagonist, and once they get saved, they go and try to save the day alongside their fellow werewolves. They do get the bare minimum treatment from the writers, which is a crime because imagine having Joe, Fuma, and Harwa as your bias and seeing how little they matter in these stories. It's just awful. But don't worry, because Maki and Yuma stands are having it worse. And I mean, worse. Over to the episodic characters, we have Luca, represented by Maki, and Lewis, represented by Yuma. These two are twins who come out of nowhere, do not have a single backstory regarding who they are, and they're also shoved into the void. I would say background, but that is not even the case here. When they are not around, they literally do not exist anymore. They get introduced into Grey City as transfer students halfway through the story, have their character arcs just that they want to save the brainwashed werewolves from the big bad, and at the end of the story have them be revealed to be descendants of people who used to live in the kingdom of Ashana. However, despite this clearly dramatic reveal, it does not tie into who these characters are, nor who they were before Grey City took place. It gets worse when Blood Altar completely dismisses them and has these two not existing until the very last chapter. After the big bad is defeated, they literally pop up in front of Sooha out of nowhere. And I wish I would exaggerate about this, but they meet Sooha in an enclosed space where they were nowhere near around her, and suddenly they're just like, hello, here, we exist. They introduce themselves to her and apologize for missing from the 70 chapters that revolve around Blood Altar. What in the actual fuck? You might be confused about what is going on here, but I might have an answer that some of you might like or not, depending on how you will perceive this. Dark Moon started its rundown in January of 2022. The episodes quickly got released during this time, with episode 20 being out in April of 2022. N-Team was not even in its reality show stage, where the contestants could be selected to participate in an audition, so most of the characters remained left to interpretation. Hype clearly wanted Kay, EJ, Nicholas, and Taki to be part of N-Team, obviously shown by the boys' presence in Drunk Dazed, which came out in 2021, but they still had to make the boys go through the reality show stage of audition to make things square, but we all know they would have debuted anyway, so it doesn't matter at the end of the day. During the production of Dark Moon, the guys at Hype clearly designed the upcoming Japanese group as a 7-member lineup similar to Enhypen. This can be seen in the appearance of all the characters from the webtoon in the Wattpad version of Blood Altar, minus Luca and Lewis. It is clear without any shadow of a doubt that Hype changed their mind about the number of members who will debut in N-Team, but by adding 2 new members, and by extension 2 new characters, aka Luca and Lewis, the creators forgot for a second about the lore they created for these members to begin with, and as a result, quickly rushed to create 2 new characters and have them be added into the story in a very rushed way. This is further proved by how they pop in the stories as well. Not once is either Luca or Lewis mentioned by Khan himself, who does mention the missing members of N-Team and Blood Altar, Camille, Ruslan, and Mahan, several times throughout the story. Heck, during the adaptation from the story of Drunk Dazed, Khan gives Sooha a gift that is described to be a framed photo of 7 wolf puppies, one of which is mentioned to look very similar to Khan. Timeline issues aside, given how these guys met each other during their teenage years, so they could have never taken that photo as wolf puppies, the lack of Luca and Lewis irks me. Why not postpone this episode that was out in September of 2022, the same month andteam announced their debut, and by extension their final lineup, edit 2 more werewolves in that goddamn picture, and make small changes to how Khan refers to the rest of the members. You have shown you have no problems changing the story and characters, why not do it for something that will help people enjoy the story a tad more? It gets more worse in Grey City, where they are supposed to be main characters as well, because outside of the mission to save Camille, Ruslan, and Mayhan, with whom they have no connection at all by the way, they have no purpose to exist. If you remove the brainwashed werewolves from the story, by extension, Luca and Lewis are also removed because they have no reason to exist. That isn't a way to write 2 characters based on idols whom people have as their bias. I cannot even imagine how Maki and Yuma stans must feel about their character being treated like this. Because when you go and read this webtoon, you expect to find your bias having some relevancy, but they don't. But let's look at the bright side. They got spared from repetitive arcs, like how Khan's character suffered. Before we go forward for this issue, let's start first with what a character arc is. A character arc is a transformation or inner journey of a character over the course of a story. If a story has a character arc, the character begins as one sort of a person and gradually transforms into a different sort of person in response to changing developments in the story. Khan is probably one of the most tragic characters we have seen so far, with him being the direct descendant of Vargar. He's the descendant of the very first wolf clan, something he seems to be aware of and is prepared from a very young age for his coronation, in order to become the leader of the wolves. However, his coronation is interrupted by a demonic vampire who starts a battle between the vampires and werewolves, ending with the werewolves' defeat. Khan is saved by his mother, who collapsed due to her severe injuries and passes away. He is then taken by his adoptive mother, Mary, who makes sure to give Khan the love he would need in order to maintain his humanity and keep those around him safe. Over the course of Grey City, Khan goes from someone who is unaware of who he is, discovering that he is a lycanthrope, that he's the descendant of the very first wolf clan, something said by the rest of the boys as well once the information is out, and finds out that through his status, he is meant to lead all of the wolves as he is their leader. This is part of the reason why he leaves Greyville alongside the others, as he realized that all the events that happened in the story by this point were meant to happen, and normally from here onward, his character should keep on evolving, right? Wishful thinking. In Blood Altar, outside of the other issue, Khan essentially gets reset back to his roots. One can say that this is his character, and his, cold, distant nature could be just part of his charm, similar to how Solon's tsundere attitude is. And from this perspective, I would very much agree. But they full-on reset Khan. His story in Blood Altar, besides, saving Sooha once she's captured, is to find out more about himself and who he is. As a werewolf, he feels incomplete due to the fact that he does not transform into a wolf during a full moon. I thought we made it clear in Grey City that he's not like the other werewolves. Furthermore, halfway through the story, the werewolves run into the storage facility where a bunch of kidnapped wolves are locked away, and when they free all of them, this decrepit, dying waste of an old man goes on to tell Khan his backstory on why he is so special, goes on to explain the necklace that Khan is wearing, which, to clarify, is the same necklace Khan's father gave him during the coronation, and from the way it was presented was clearly the equivalent of the village's crown, something Khan also remembered during the flashbacks from Grey City, and that Khan is actually meant to lead the werewolves. Later on, Vargar appears in Khan's dreams and tells him the same thing the old man did, and also that he's the moon meant to guide the werewolves, which Khan realizes the meaning of those words by creating a magical howl that allows werewolves to instantly turn into their wolf forms. So outside of the last information that I just told you, the rest of Khan's arc is literally the same as the one from Grey City, and the worst one while at it, since Blood Altar focuses on Enhypen, as the full name of the webtoon is Blood Altar with Enhypen. You had Grey City, where you could focus entirely on Khan's arc alone, and you did, and then you could have had him become a more grounded and leveled up character in Blood Altar. That would also make Enhypen's vampires, by extension, see Khan's maturity and how he treats Sooha, and then have them go through the events of the story in an indirect goal of becoming as mature as Khan. This character is the perfect example of a concept that sounds interesting and could result in an amazing story, if only the people at Hype knew how to distribute their story. Now, I am aware that Grey City and Blood Altar have different artists, with the artists of Blood Altar being Rangdo and Henny, while for Grey City, the artist is Gulchan. But regarding the story, the writers could have told the artists which aspects of the story they should focus on and how the story should be presented to avoid these kinds of issues. Before you come at me and tell me that the artists don't have control over the story, as most of it was already complete by the time the webtoon started to roll out, keep in mind the Wattpad and webtoons have significant differences already. Vetchel's Academy is not a night-exclusive school, but rather a school that has both daytime and nighttime classes. Sooha makes more friends outside of Enhypen and NTEAM's groups, while she's also more of a badass in the Wattpad version, and so on. These are changes that are already present between the two versions, to the point where when we refer to Blood Altar, we have to specify if we refer to the webtoon version or the Wattpad version. So why not show most of Khan's development through flashbacks that reveal his identity, instead of going for this repetitive arc? You clearly had no trouble showing Sooha's past over the course of 4 chapters, where the story IRL is actually paused so the reader couldn't get on with the program. Or, if you wanted this reveal to be more later in the story, you could have had Khan and the others be confused about Khan's true identity and make it in Grey City just that Khan is a special wolf and the reason they leave Greyville is to search for answers. I am aware some of you will tell me that they did this to have Grey City act as a spin-off series, where it isn't mandatory to read Blood Altar to find answers, but in that case, why not go on the BTS, LE SSERAFIM, and TXT route and have this story be independent, not connected with Enhypen's story? And with this, I'm assuming you believe that I am done with Khan and that he got pretty much, a fair enough of, punishment from the story. It gets worse. Now we're going to the biggest issue, the biggest elephant in the room. This is probably the worst. And I mean, the worst thing one could have done when it comes to this story, and generally any story for that matter. I want to explain more in detail why this is an issue to begin with, so let's go over what real person fiction is. Real person fiction is a genre of writing similar to fanfiction, but featuring celebrities or other real people. And as you may tell, Dark Moon fits in this real person fiction category. Sure, the characters are not, referenced by their actual names, but they did this because, they don't want to get into copyright issues with, the member's name being constantly added into the story. So they went with the route of, we're gonna give these guys fictional names, but add the same initials to be easier to trace to their, member identity. We cannot get Dark Moon into full-on fanfiction category, as it is official, but one thing people should not do when it comes to these stories, in general, is to ship people together, as the stories are based on real people with real lives. Shipping should be done only, and I mean only, when the people involved say it themselves that they are okay with it. Until then, do not assume that they would most likely agree with this, as you do not know what these idols think or feel when they see shipping in general. Enhypen, for example, has expressed dislike towards the idea of shipping of the members, but we already know people still do it anyways, but hey, at least they got the word out.
아 맞다 그런 김에 폰 바꿨어요.
오, 제이 형 저랑 같은 폰. 커플은 아니고 그냥 같은 폰. 커플 폰이라고 하지 말아주세요.
네,
그냥 똑같은 폰.
똑폰.
제이 형은 살짝
저는 초록색이에요.
저는 스페이스 블랙. 둘이 사겨? 나는데요?
누구랑요? 저랑 통통이요?
We always comment on shipping that is done for art, but so can be done by fanfiction too. In Blood Altar, this may not sound as a massive issue, but give it a listen and be the judge. As I mentioned, the first half of Blood Altar starts off as a polyamorous story that gradually evolves into an action-oriented one by the end of said story. One of the main driving forces of the first half is the love square. In this love square, we have Sooha, Hilai, Solon, and Khan. Yes, the leader of the werewolves is one of Sooha's canon love options. Around the end of the first half, Sooha encounters Khan during a lunar eclipse, something that normally is described as a magical moment. However, Heli starts to panic when Sooha tells him this information, and soon we learn why. Khan later tells Sooha that because he laid eyes on her during a lunar eclipse, this made him fall in love with her, and only her for the rest of his life. What? Excuse me, what in the actual fuck? Who was in their right mind when they thought this was fine? I'm sorry, let me rephrase what I just said, but by more realistic terms. Hype made K from andteam tell engines that he will love them and only them for the rest of his life. I'm gonna give you a couple of seconds to process this. I'm not going to let any of y'all come forward and tell me that Sooha represents both engines and Lune, as Sooha only appears in Blood Altar, which, like I said, the long title includes with Enhypen, and also, if in a mystical plot twist she is both fandoms, why does she end up with one of the members of Enhypen instead of, just letting her be single and, betray one of the sides? It's worse when you realize they made K do this. K. If they really wanted a werewolf to be in love with Sooha, albeit messed up, it would have been better if it was one of the 5 members of andteam that got selected from an audition. Joe, Haruha, Maki, Fuma, or Yuma. But no, they had to go to one of the 4 members of andteam that were in Island and pick the one that was the most mistreated by that survival show. The one who was in the first half of Island, praised to the ends of the universe and back, was not set to the ground as a result, and then all of a sudden in the second half, he is the main villain of the story who at the very last second gets the spotlight out of him gone. They tried to pull a Heather from Total Drama so bad it's ridiculous. I have no issues with Enhypen's final light-up, by the way. I think the producers did a good choice, and I'm glad Sooha was selected, as I rooted for him the most to win and show to the whole world that he can in fact be a sexy bitch. But they kept K for too long in Island and played with his dream of debuting. He's a 19.7 liner, and by 2020, a bunch of them had debuted already. A couple of examples include BTS's Jungkook, 17's Mingyu, D8, and DK, and Stray Kids' leader Bangchan. Sadly, in K-pop, being 23 years old and not debuted is almost a death sentence, as the industry deems someone like this too old, with the industry also looking to debut little infants. Sure, you can argue that K wanted to debut a bit too late, but he's a prime example overall that if you have ambition and a bit of luck, you can do anything. He got to debut at the age of 25 and be a successful idol. Generally, when it comes to Island as well, both Engines and Lune can confirm that the survival show traumatized the boys. K in particular refuses to even start a conversation regarding the show. That's how bad it is. So to have him be in love with the representation of Engines, when in reality he was this close to actually having them as his fandom, disgusting. They tried to fix this towards the end of the story, with Khan telling Sooha that he loved her before the whole lunar eclipse thing, and that if she is happy with Heli, then he's willing to let her go. But he still tells her that he will love her and only her for the rest of his life. This makes it worse! Why did you have the lunar eclipse then if he loved her before that? Why? Why lock him in this love that is impossible? Why not have him be in love with her, like he said he was at the beginning of the story? He sees that Sooha loves Heli, and his love for her shifts from romantic to platonic, with him then going and finding love somewhere else, into someone who also loves him back. He could have found love in, I don't know, the representation of Lune from the story. I know there's no candidate for this type of character in the story, as andteam gets the little crumbs, but I have an option available. Mika. She's a minor character in Grey City who will not be mentioned in the lore video, because there is no reason to add her in it. She just does not play a crucial role in the lore as much as I would have wished for her to. But in the story, she's the only villager who supports Khan, with her clearly shown to have a crush on him. Khan is initially unaware of this, but is told by Mika at the end of the story, resulting in Khan then asking her to watch over the graves of, spoiler alert, his adoptive mother and former caretaker of the werewolves, which Mika proudly accepts. Their bond, albeit not shown to its full potential, it could have been the best example of how a fandom is always going to be in support of the members, and that they don't have to be, present all the time and, talk to each other face to face, because that bond and that connection that manages to, take over time and space is always going to be strong. That type of connection would have been perfect, as it would have also shown that fandoms that are across the world and don't get to meet their idols still get to play a crucial role in supporting these idols at the end of the day. Their support is enough, and the fact that you get the chance to see this as a person is just a bonus. At the end of the day, we're all at one fandom and we're all united. No one is more important or valuable than the others when it comes to this. We're a collective, we act as a collective, we show support as a collective. And this would have been the perfect example for Khan to go and be like, wait, but I remember Mika, who was, you know, the person who loved me and supported me during my darkest times, be in my life. So, although I'm going to save Sooha, my strength and the power to, you know, create the magical howl that will allow me to, you know, defeat the evil bad will come from the memory of Mika. And it seems the only thing that Khan thinks about is his love for Sooha, which is very fucked up. This is the only thing that makes the story go from a good story to a dog water story. The other issues are present, but you could turn a blind eye to them. This, however, I simply cannot. When I read Blood Altar and I saw this, I was disgusted simply because I didn't know Enhypen at the time, but I was aware about the fact that there were some things going on with Kay, and me seeing this, with me watching Island as of the making of this video, just makes me even more disgusted. So thanks, I hate it. So, in conclusion, Dark Moon is a good story. It is an acceptable story while at it, but it needs to be more corrected. I hope in the following stories, The Witch of Yarsa and Two Moons, the story will gradually become better. The Children of Vanfield is already in a good direction with the story and how the characters are being presented, and I hope this level of quality will continue to stay that way. In the next video that will come out, I will talk about the lore of Dark Moon and explain it in its entirety so that you don't have any trouble understanding what is going on in the story. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.